The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, this is Jason Hammond from TechExcel, and today we're going to be talking about DevSuite for quality management, and specifically we'll be catching up with DevTest 5.2 and 5.2.1 just to highlight some of the new features that have come out recently. So this webinar is really geared for both people that have no idea what DevSuite is, and then also for existing customers or prospects that want to learn more. I'm going to give an overview demo of the quality management features in DevSuite, and I'm going to point out new features as we walk through various parts of the application. So for those of you that are new to TechExcel and DevSuite, I did want to mention that we have actually two different product lines. Today we're going to be talking about DevSuite, which is our complete ALM solution. It can be used for both traditional and agile development, but today we're going to be really focusing on the quality management piece, so we will touch on some of the integrations, but maybe we'll be focusing on DevTest. We also have our service suite, which is for IT service and customer support. And those solutions are integrated too, so if you ever have a need to look at that side of the house, we'd be happy to provide you with more information, and we're always having webinars on that too. I'd also like to mention before we dig into the presentation that next week we're going to have a similar webinar to this that'll cover the new features in DevSpec, and it'll cover more on the Agile side of things, so Agile management using DevSpec. So today we're going to be talking about DevTest. DevTest is part of a larger suite of tools, including DevSpec for requirements management and DevTrack for implementation tracking. I'm going to hit some integration points between DevTest and these solutions during the demo. We'll actually start with creating requirements and then tracking your quality lifecycle through testing and defect tracking, but mainly we're going to spend most of our time in DevTest. So the real building blocks of your test management project are going to be requirements and knowledge items, test templates, and test tasks. So a couple of these are TechExcel-specific terms I'm going to explain, but just a little groundwork so that when we are taking a look at the demo, it all makes sense. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is just requirements and knowledge items. At the beginning of any project, the first thing you're probably doing is defining what the requirements or specifications are going to be. So we store these items in DevSpec, which is going to be the requirements view once we're looking at the application. And you're able to define your requirements, have a whole separate workflow that will allow you to move those requirements through an approval process. You're able to use a Word import, and all this is going to be covered next week in Vineet's webinar on DevSpec. But today we'll just start off by showing you how once you create some requirements, how you can transform them into test cases and test runs or test cycles. Knowledge items are supporting information that might be documents, screenshots, or other information that you may want to have attached to the requirement or the test case that will help your team move through that process and understand what exactly they're testing and what they need to test. When you link your requirements to your test cases, you're going to have a couple benefits. First off, you're going to, one, you can create those test cases directly from the requirements as opposed to linking them. I'll show you how that all works in a sec. And also, if a requirement changes, you can flag those test cases or even the corresponding test tasks, which are the execution runs, to let the tester know that the requirement has changed and maybe they need to update what they're doing. The other two items that we're going to talk about today are test templates and tasks. First off, a test template is our concept of items that exist in your test library that you're going to reuse. So think of it as a master copy of a test procedure that you want to have. We're going to reuse these for each product version, and test assignment. We can define what environments are applicable for each test case so that you can use environments as a means of filtering what test coverage you should be looking at. And it can also create additional instances of a test during task creation if it needs to be verified against multiple browsers, OSs, or any sort of environment that you may be tracking now. You can customize and add your own environments. Test templates have independent status and workflow so that you can have an approval process around the creation of the tests. And then you're also going to be able to see all your test execution data at the library level too, so you can make some decisions about what tests are effective in your library. Now the corresponding item to a test template is a test task, and these are the execution records of each of the tests that you're handing out. So I take an item in the library, I assign it out to the team. I might want to add some additional properties, like maybe what build number they tested or date that are due and things like that. But essentially, we're handing out the same item from the library to the team, and on that record that they're going to receive, that task, they're going to execute it, and it's going to retain the history and notes and who ran it and the time and the status. The tester's also going to be able to have visibility into previous instances of that test case. So has it been run before? Have there been bugs found? And they'll be able to see those bugs. They would also be able to see any linked knowledge items or requirements. And then we're going to save all these test tasks. That's going to be the basis for all your reporting and future analysis in terms of scheduling and such. That's a little background on the items that we're going to cover today, the types of items. And we're going to look at this complete life cycle through the specs and requirements, through creating a test library, and also through regression and submitting bugs into either the backlog or a development sprint or milestone. Along the way, I am going to be covering the following new features. So if you're an existing DevTest user and you were just thinking, oh no, he's just going to do a demo on DevTest, we are going to hit the following features that may be important to you or interesting to you. I'm going to be showing the new combined planning and task views that are in DevTest 5.2. I'm also going to be covering the dynamic template feature, so the ability to assign out test coverage on the fly. We're also going to be taking a look at the new verification point notes, so having freely editable columns within the verification points in DevTest. We're going to show how you can share template and task URLs. And finally, I'll illustrate how there is multiple levels of planning folders now available for teams that might need them. Those are the things we're going to cover today. There may be an extra feature or two in there too. But without any further ado, we're going to take a look at DevSuite. Now, I should mention before we really get started in DevSuite that if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the chat functionality that's on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can ask any questions. I'd be happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. And also, we are going to be recording this webinar so that if you want to watch it again or share it with any friends, you can certainly do that. All right, so let's start off by taking a look at DevSuite. When I log into DevSuite initially, I am going to see a dashboard, and I'm going to see a number of modules based on my license type. I'm going to see a summary of all of the projects I belong to, and they could be different project types for requirements management or defect tracking or test management. I'm also going to be able to see specifically any assignments that I have, and I can also drill down to see various projects I belong to, and even specific bugs that might be assigned for me to validate. You can also add system-defined messages to the system. So if I want to, and you can see I can move this around and put them where I want. But if I want to send a message to the team about a training that's coming up or a new version of an internal tool that we might be using, I can also add that to everyone's dashboard or my dashboard. Each user can also customize their dashboard and add reports, drill-down reports, for example, or if I want to add a graphic report, I can do that too. So in this case, I might want to have a report that shows me graphically how our test plan's going in terms of the release. And I can see a lot of new tasks that haven't been completed yet in test cycle 3 and 4. At the end of the demo, I am going to be covering some of the reporting functionality, and at that point in time, any of the reports that I show you, you could add to your dashboard also. So let's start off the demo by talking about how we begin a project and perhaps creating a couple requirements that we can then use as a basis for some test cases. When I click on the requirement view, which is our product DevSpec, I can see a number of different development spaces that I may want to add new requirements to, or I can look at some existing requirements. DevSpec utilizes a tree to manage your requirements, and in each of the folders here, I'm going to be able to see any of the requirements that contain there, and then all the details below. Since Vineet's going to be covering extensively DevSpec in the webinar next week, I'm just going to highlight a few things. So I might want to create a new requirement. I can do that via dialog or using our Word add-in. So I can just say new requirement, for example. And we can go ahead and submit that. All right, so we've submitted a new requirement. Well, let's say we've submitted a lot of new requirements, and we're feeling pretty good about the requirements that we have for the upcoming project that we have, Content Sharing Manager. For each of the requirements I have, I can add additional requirements and link them. That can form even a parent-child relationship and a hierarchy. We have a brand new hierarchy view or relationship view in DevSpec, and we also have a roadmap view too, that will allow you to see kind of a task board for any of your requirements. Now, because Vineet's going to be covering all these features next week, I'm going to move into the quality management side so that we can keep things about a half hour for the webinar and then about 10 minutes for questions. So once I've created my requirements, I can create test cases in a couple different ways. First, if I am someone who has access to the DevSpec view, I can push a test case directly to a specific project that I might have. Now, another way that you might want to create test cases from requirements is by digging into the testing view and starting off in the test library itself. Within DevTest in the testing view, I have two main views. I have a template view, which is my library view, and I have my task view, which is my planning and execution view. In the template view, if I want to create test cases from requirements, one nice thing that I can do is instead of pushing a test case one at a time from each requirement, I can select a folder, or even let's create a new folder. So let's say new requirements. All right, so I'm going to just create a new folder here. And I can click on this new template from DevSpec button. And what it's going to allow me to do is select all of the requirements that I might have in a development space. So we were working on Content Sharing Manager 1. I can select all the requirements or specifications that I want to. And all I need to do is click link. And now we're going to have at least the beginnings of a lot of test cases that we may need to run to test these features. Now, of course, you may want to have some additional test cases to test a requirement. We do have a one-to-many or many-to-many relationship so that you can have multiple test cases related to a single requirement, or a single test case can test multiple requirements too. So we're going to go ahead and maybe fill out some additional details for a test case, maybe set the status. But by creating our test cases directly from our requirements, one very important thing has happened. When I click on the All Links page, I will see that there's a relationship between that new test case and this requirement. I can double-click on the requirement and see it. I can even, edit it and do things to it if I have permission to, but I'll be able to see the details of it. Now, as I mentioned in the PowerPoint, this relationship between the requirement and test means that if this requirement changes, I can have a flag pop up here letting me know that I may need to update my test case. And also, at the end of the demo, when I show the traceability matrix, I'll be able to see the relationship between this requirement and any corresponding tests I create for it and their status. So you'll be able to see, just with a couple clicks, that traceability is built right into the tool. So instead of kind of having to go out and kind of seek links and stuff like that, the links are created automatically during the process. So in addition to being able to create your test cases directly from your requirements, you also might want to create some test cases using just a dialog or one of the various import methods we have. So of course, I can create it via dialog, fill out the details of a test and create it, or I can just also right-click on a folder and select one of the multiple import options that we have. So I can import tests from a text file, XML, or Excel. Those are all the options we have there. So a few things I want to talk about in terms of items in the test library and the DevTest UI in general before we move into planning and execution. So DevTest allows you to organize your test cases in a tree. This tree is important because it's going to come up in a number of different places in the application. You're going to be able to use it in planning. You're going to be able to use it when you're executing test cases to provide context. And it's also going to be available in reporting too. So I have some customers that may organize this by product or project. And it's also common to organize them by functional area because remember, we're going to reuse this content. So maybe Content Manager version 1 has 20 new requirements I need to test, but I'm also going to need to make sure that I test all the existing function that may have been in an earlier version of that application. Or once I'm up to Content Manager version 4, I may need to regress versions 1 through 3 to make sure nothing has been broken while creating this new one. We'll show you kind of how that process would work when we create a test plan. Down below, see the details of each of my test cases. So the DevTest UI is completely customizable. In this case, I have some kind of sample fields that I'm using for the demo today. But you would have typically a title. Maybe you want to have a description of the test. You can have some test steps. And we'll see some various options for the test steps in a moment. Maybe you want to track time. So the special time fields that we have in DevTest will allow you to set up estimated times for how long it will take to run a test. Or if you want, you can have multiple fields. You can track setup and execution. So you can get a real sense for how long it's going to take to run each test case and any test plan that you create. So when I create a test plan, based on all the estimates for the tests that are included, I'll be able to get a sense for how long it takes to run the whole plan or a test cycle or even an individual test assignment. We also have a new feature in DevTest 5.2.1 that allows you to create dynamic templates or designate a template as dynamic. So for existing users, I want to point out a couple things about this feature. First off, it does need to be turned on the admin on the feature options settings. And also there is a user permission associated with this feature. So you're going to need to make sure that your users are updated to have permission to do this, otherwise you won't have the commands in the UI. Any templates that you want to make dynamic, all I need to do is check this box, and you will need to add that checkbox to the UI too after you turn on the feature. And then what this will allow me to do is assign out tasks within a test cycle, but without using the planning wizard. So for new users, this will make a lot more sense in a minute after we talk about the planning wizards. But for existing users, in just a moment, I'll show you exactly how you would use this feature, but I did want to point out that in the library, you are going to need to mark that template as dynamic. Now, I did mention that in addition to having just free-form test steps like this, we do have the ability to define multiple steps within the tool. So I can go ahead and do that here. And all I do is click Setup to add additional steps or change the steps. So DevTest has multiple ways to represent steps. We have simple editable steps like we see here, and those can be imported too separately if you want. And we also have the ability to use variables to create steps and even matrices. We have some nice videos on our website at help.techexcel.com and also on our main website under the Community tab that can walk you through the various types of verification points. When I'm looking at an item in the test library, I'm going to be able to see all the times a test has been executed. So I can see that this particular test has been executed a number of times, and it's also yielded some bugs. So the system I'm using today is integrated with DevTrack, our defect tracking tool, and as we move into the demo, I will show you how to submit a bug into DevTrack. And I can click on a bug to see the bug and the details, and even to move it into a different workflow state or edit it if I have permission to. So that I can get all the details of what's going on in a bug so that both when I'm looking at the library or looking at a particular test assignment that I'm running, I can easily jump to the bug and close it out as verified, or send it back to development because maybe it's not quite fixed yet. We also, as I mentioned, the PowerPoint have the ability to define environments that you're going to use. That can be done at either an individual test case level or at the library level. But what this allows you to do is designate what environments are applicable for a test case, and then when we're creating a test plan, we can use those environments to filter what coverage we see. I've already mentioned the All Links page, but this is a place where you would see all your requirements and such. You can also, of course, add additional links to requirements here too, just by clicking Add New. In both DevSpec, DevTrack, and DevTest, we're always going to be tracking a full audit trail of everything that's going on for a particular item. This can be especially helpful if you're in a compliance situation where you do need to have a full audit trail. You're able to see every field change, who changed things and when. Everything will be time-stamped. Most of the modules also have the ability to require electronic signatures if you want to move from one state to another, and also additional logging capabilities too. So these are kind of the main fields I wanted to talk about on the UI here. I did mention that this was a sample system that I had set up, but all of the fields are easily added via point-and-click admin with no special programming required. So I can just go to the admin, click on a page, and add a new field whenever I want to. Any fields that I add are going to be immediately searchable, reportable, and then also available as column choices here too. So one of the features that I mentioned in the, before I move on, one of the features I mentioned was also we have a new feature that allows you to generate a URL to for any of your tasks. So if you've ever wanted to just send a URL or copy a URL for an individual, you can do that too. The URL is encrypted so that if you did need to send it to someone outside the system, you can do that without revealing anything about any security risks too. That feature is also available in the task view too, but just an easy way to generate a URL to share with people so they know the details of a test case. All right, so now that we've created our library of tests, so we've started with requirements, we've created some test cases from requirements, maybe done some additional linking. The next thing we're going to do is talk about planning and execution. So for existing users, this is going to be the biggest change I probably show you today, and that is we have combined the planning and the task view. And as of DevTest 5.2, you no longer need to manage 3 views. You can do everything that you did in the planning view before in the task view. So the DevTest task view allows, the first thing you'll probably notice is we have another tree that is going to represent my test execution. And so this tree allows me to set up multiple levels of folders. And with 5.2, we've added the ability to have multiple levels of product folders to organize. So if I want to add another level of folder below this, I can easily do that. So let's just say do that. So we could just say another folder. And what this means is that I can create a release further down in the tree. So I can have many levels of folders here. We've also made it so that you can have unlimited levels of test cycle grouping folders too. So for existing users, a lot more flexibility in terms of how you see the execution tree. For new users, I'm going to manage these orange folders mainly as a way to organize my test plans together. And then all my test plans are going to be represented by these kind of tan folders. So the tan folders represent our releases or test plans, and I can create a new test plan by using the Dev Test Planning Wizard, which I'll show you in a minute. Down below, I'm going to have a roll-up of all of the data based on the folders that I select. So I can select maybe Content Sharing 3, see all the test cycles that were included in that test plan, and see what the results were. I can also further filter based on one of the green folders from the library, or by creating ad hoc queries or saved queries based on any fields that I want to use. So you can really filter and drill down and see exactly the data that you need to see when you're planning, so that it's easier to figure out what you need to do next. I can also view this data by team member to see, how many items are assigned to each person, and whether they've completed their assignment, and also by environment too. All right. So let's take a look at how we can go about creating a new test plan in DevTest. Then we'll execute some tests and look at some reports. So the first thing I want to do is create a new test plan. So I'm going to select a new release, and we're going to create a brand new test plan called new test. So let's say content sharing 5.0. All right. I can select which DevTrack project I want to be able to submit bugs into. And it's probably a good time to mention that we do integrate also with Jira and Bugzilla and Mantis too. So if you do want to use those for your defect tracking, you can do that also. I'm going to pick what team members I'm going to be able to include in this test plan. During test cycle assignment, you might want to skip this page if you are not making adjustments on a daily or weekly basis in terms of who's part of this plan. Next, I can choose whether or not I want to use the environment feature for the demo today. I'll pick a couple of these, maybe a couple languages too, just to give you a sense for how that works. And then based on my environment selections, it's going to give me some combinations of platform and language. And then I can pick which ones we're actually going to be testing during the course of this test plan. Based on which of those environments I picked, it's going to prune the library tree and only show me applicable content for it. So you can see the game test coverage I had is not available because I didn't pick any game consoles. We're going to go ahead and pick some of this coverage to add to my plan. So I can see my plan is going to include 96 tasks and about 6 hours of test coverage. At this point, I can go ahead and assign owners or things like that, or I can wait and do that at test cycle creation. Because right now, I'm really creating just a larger plan that we're going to use. So I can pick that start date and end date. So let's start it here and end it next week. It's pretty short in terms of the amount of coverage. This final page of the wizard that I'm looking at allows me to run some test areas multiple times. If you don't enable this feature, you won't see this page. You'll just go right to creation. But this is a nice way that if there are areas that are high risk or environments that you want to make sure get looked at, you can make adjustments to the plan and add multiple tasks or multiple passes for a particular test area. All right, so we've created a new test plan for Content Sharing Manager 5.0. And with that, I can now create a new test cycle or test assignment underneath it. I can also create folders under this release if I want to group together my test cycles. Maybe I want to call them, group them by milestone or sprints. Maybe I want to list what sprints we're working on and then have my test cycles under those sprints also. I'm going to do test cycle 1. And we're going to say that we're testing build 10. So we just got a brand new build. I'm going to set the plan finish date. You might notice the plan finish date matches the end of the test plan, so that we said we wanted to complete this by the end of when the plan is. I'm going to say we're going to hand out a assignment that's going to be due tomorrow. And let's only test one environment right now. If I select multiple environments at the test cycle level, DevTest will look at each of the items in the library, and it'll see whether or not they should be run against more than one environment. And if so, it'll create an additional task for each of them. So maybe some of my tests need to be tested against, all my English tests may need to be tested against Windows 7 and Mac, but my Japanese tests are only going to be assigned to Windows 7. So I'll only create one instance of each of those. So now I'm going to see the tree based on what's in my test plan. So once again, it's been pruned to only show me what's part of the test plan that we're working in. The reason we do this is it allows us to, within the reporting, compare your progress. So we can see how far along we are to the total plan, so that we know how close are we to being done, have we covered everything. So that's really where the test plan and the release concept comes from. It's setting that scope for what we're going to do throughout this test plan. And now, so I'm going to go ahead and click Finish, and now we have signed out our first test cycle. I'm going to see that I signed out 14 tasks against build 10, and nothing's complete yet. So we assigned out about 52 minutes of coverage. At the wizard, I didn't assign any owners yet, but I can easily select maybe a section of the green tree and click Edit and then assign it to somebody. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's assign some of this to James. I can also, along the way, update any other fields too. So this is how you can bulk update any of the test cases just using the UI. So now I can see when I click on the team page, I can see that I assigned 8 to Terry and 5 to James, and that we still have one test that's in it to be assigned state. So maybe when one of those guys is done, I can grab that additional assignment. Now, I can now toggle between the planning view dashboards and also the individual tasks using this drop-down right here. So for test execution, the tester would log in, and if you don't have planning permissions, you won't have the ability to see those planning detail pages. But they can log in and then start running their assignments. Now, you might notice that the UI for the task has some additional fields. So when I'm defining what I want the task UI to be, I can pick which template fields from the library I want to include, and then I can also add additional fields too. So maybe I want to track build number or an actual results, or just for fun, I added a silly field called days of the week. But you can add any fields that you want to the UI, as many fields as you might need. Also, when I'm running these test cases, and let's go ahead and see what that would look like. So I can just move a test into the workflow state that I want. Some fields may turn red to alert me that they are mandatory, so I can go ahead and update that. And for pass, maybe I don't want them to actually add an expected result or actual result. They could if they wanted, but it's not mandatory. Now, some of the tests might have steps. So in this case, I can see that I have a test that requires some steps to be run. I can either view them in the UI with the scroll bar or make this field bigger, or I can also click Edit and pop up a dialog to represent all my steps. So in this case, I'm going to start filling them out. And I'm going to say this passed and this passed. But when I logged out, it did not take me to the home screen. This is not the home screen. Now, for existing DevTest users, this is new. You can add notes for each of the verification points too. So I'm going to click OK. Because I failed one of the steps, the whole task is now failed. It's going to ask me to add additional notes. The home page was broke. And I do still need to add my time also. Now, when I click Save, DevTest is going to prompt me to do one of 3 things. I can submit a new bug, I can search for an existing bug, or if this test has failed already in this test plan, I can see a list of linked bugs. Since this is a new test cycle in a new test plan, I'm just going to go ahead and create a bug. But I did want to mention this also. This functionality also works whether you're using a third-party tool too. You do have the ability to both create new and search. When I click OK, I'm going to see some of the data mapped over if I'm using DevTrack. If I'm using Jira, I won't have the mapping. That's something we're going to be adding in the future, but right now we only support mapping for DevTrack. But you can see that I've mapped over the steps, and then the user would just fill out any additional fields they're required, And now we have a relationship between this test and a bug. And so if I come back later and pass this test, I can then easily click on the bug and, close it, say it's done. But right now I can see the status of it. It's assigned to a developer. He's working on it. We're going to have a history that shows that I ran the test and it failed. I'm going to be able to see the steps and everything too. Now, one of the things that you can do in DevTest that is brand new is that if you ever wanted to add some additional coverage to a test cycle after it's been created, you can, of course, go back and use the wizard and run it that way. But we've seen a lot of demand for what a lot of test organizations call session-based testing, which is when you want to assign out some time that's maybe unscripted to team members so that they can run, just kind of do some, I hate to say ad hoc, but do some well-defined testing and just kind of search exploratory testing is a better word for it. So DevTest 5.2.1 features a new feature called dynamic templates. And what this allows you to do is right-click on any test cycle and create a new dynamic task. The dynamic tasks allow you to select any task you've designated as dynamic. So I have 1 hour session. You can assign it to a specific owner and modify things like the environment or the time here, or just leave it as it is. You can also add multiple copies of the same test. So if I want to add another 1 hour session for another user, I can easily do that too. So I'm going to add 2 1-hour sessions. And I can even pick what environments. I only have one environment selected right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now, so we have 2 1-hour sessions. They've been added to our plan in terms of the total hours. So I can now see that instead of 52 minutes, I now have 2 hours and 52 minutes. So that's the new dynamic template feature that's in DevTest 5.2.1. So when it comes time to create a new test cycle, I do want to show you that you're going to have some additional options in addition to just picking the folders. So let's do test cycle 2. First thing, I can copy from existing. So this just creates an exact duplicate of a previous test cycle. It's a great way to create a smoke test or a basic acceptance test very quickly. In this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say that we received build 15 today. And once again, I'm going to say when this is going to be due. We're going to say it's due Monday. And now, instead of selecting the folders manually, I'm going to click on Add Coverage Using Query. And what this allows me to do is search my existing data to help me figure out what I should do next. So in this case, I'm going to look for things that have failed previously. So I could pick multiple statuses, failed and did not run and such. But I just wanted to illustrate that it's going to bring back those 2 test cases, or the test case and a cloned test case, that have that failed status. In addition to just the execution data, I could also use library level data. So if I wanted to maybe flag items in the library as being high risk or important, I can do that too. And I can also, if I'm using DevTrack, I can use defect status too. So I can look for tests that are linked to a bug that is marked ready for QA testing or something like that. Okay? And those queries can be saved and reused too, so that as you accumulate more data in DevTest, you can get more and more efficient in terms of how you do your testing. All right, so now we're going to assign that out. So now we have a second test cycle that is just to regress the 2 test cases that previously failed. So now I want to briefly show you some reports. Don't forget that if you do have any questions, you can use the chat functionality on the right to add them, and that we will be answering questions at the end. If we have any, we'll answer a couple questions. We have covered a number of new features that I just want to kind of recount before we move on to reporting. So we covered the combined planning and task views. We took a look at the dynamic template support, the new verification point notes, also the ability to share template and task URLs. So just like in the template view, we can do that here. I can generate a URL here, and also the additional levels of planning folders. So the last thing I'd like to cover before we open it up for questions is some of the reporting. DevTest has a number of built-in reports that you can create on a custom basis. So report types, all I do is select a folder that I want to submit, create a new report in. It can be either a public or private report based on what my permissions are, and then I select the report type I want. I'm going to create a new tabular report. And I'm going to say new report for status. And then I can pick just exactly what fields I want to see. So maybe I want to see by owner and by state. I want to see how we're doing. So I'm going to pick what test plan I want to look at. I want to pick all of them. And I'm going to be able to generate a report that shows me for all of my releases that I have right now, how many items are assigned to each person in what state. So I can see a lot of new tasks for to be assigned, and then a lot of new tasks also for Pam. So maybe I want to give her a call and see what's going on there. Any two fields that you want to use, in special fields like status, also test cycles, releases can be used. So you can generate reports that look like the one we saw on the dashboard. We also have reports that may deal with a single factor too. So if I just want to do a pie chart or something, I can do that. Just to show a distribution by status. We also have trend reports too, so I can see data over time, and I can even compare them to, let's see, we've got a good trend here. You can see both, time, the number of items over time, and you can even compare them to estimates in terms of what you were thinking in terms of targets too. So there's a lot of different reporting options in the tool, and they're both at the task level, allowing you to do both defect or task data here. And we also have them for the library level too, if you want to do things like test case effectiveness in terms of, how often is it used, how many bugs are found. And then the last report that I want to show you all before I open it for questions is the traceability report. So at the beginning, we actually created some test cases from requirements. And what the traceability report allows you to do, and that's something that's included in both DevSpec and there's also one in DevTest, but it allows you to see the relationship between the requirement, any linked bugs or development items that might be present, and then also any tests that you have linked to it. So at the end of the day, you can see exactly what's going on in terms of, did we create a test for all of our new requirements, and were they executed? So what were the results there? So the traceability really is built right in. So that was a brief overview of DevTest. And now I'd be happy to answer any additional questions, or feel free to reach out to your account manager or via our website if you'd like a demo, and we'd be happy to dig more into specific areas of the application. So let's see. I see a couple questions here. First one is about when will DevTest 5.2 be available, 2.1. It's actually available now. It's currently on the download site. You can download it right now if you like. So you just go to techexcel.com, click on the download section, and you can download a product evaluation. Upgrade. Another question about upgrading. So let's see. It says, if I upgrade, will I need to get a new license file? If you are an existing customer on maintenance and you want to upgrade, you don't need an upgrade key or anything like that. You just can upgrade using your existing license. All right, so let's see. I have a couple other questions. As I already mentioned, this is being recorded and will be up on our website in the next couple of days. Here's a question. Can two people both run the same test, or do I need to create two duplicate tests for each person? So you can have the same users collaborate on running a test. if you utilize the workflow to do that. So have one person maybe run part of it and another person run the rest. But there can only be one owner at a time for a test case. One way to maybe get around this is if you're concerned about assigning it to one person versus another, you can assign it to what we call a group folder. I was utilizing that in the demo itself, so I could assign a test case to a folder called to be assigned, and then the users that have access to that folder could then update it and move it through the workflow also. Is there a report that shows a list of test cases for the test cycle and the linked defects and their status? There absolutely is. So the way that works is I just would go to the testing view, click on the report view, and any list report that I have, so let's take a look at that. Standard list report here is going to show me all of those details. If I've added in the defect section, I will also see all the defect data also. Let's see here. Let's do that. So I'm going to do a defect count of 1. So you can see that here's a test case that has a bug. I'm going to be able to see that there's a bug here, and it's unfortunately still in a new defect state. Terry has not gotten to it yet. Right now I'm grouping by user, but I can group by test cycle also. All I do is click on the little icon here, and I click Group by Test Cycle. Now, to see the linked defect section in the report, you are going to have to pick detail as opposed to brief. Brief will not include some of the multi-line fields. All right, let's do some other questions here. When modifying the enable environment variables feature, a warning is displayed that there might be significant impact. Yeah, so there are some of those messages in the admin that may be a little more strongly worded than they need to be. Turning on the environment variable feature will not really have any impact on your fixed verification points. And most of those features can be turned on or off, and the data is retained. It just will change the way you're using the tool in terms of whether or not you will see the environment variable pages in the wizard and those tabs in both the templates and the task view. So, but sometimes I think those messages might be a little stronger than they are. But you're always free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to tell you, what impacts, if any, there would be to turning features on or off. Or you can reach out to your account manager too if you don't have my contact info directly. All right. Let's see. Let's do one more question. Okay, there's a question about the new dynamic template feature, and it's about configuring it. And yes, so the permission that you do need to turn it on in the template project on the feature option settings. Maybe I'll just kind of walk through that, so because it is a pretty new feature. So I just go to the feature option settings, and I enable dynamic template. And then you need to make sure that you add to the template description that you add that checkbox, as I have done here. So it's just a right mouse click, add control, and it will be in this list here, dynamic template. And you just need to add that checkbox somewhere. And you can, of course, utilize the workflow settings if you want to hide it from other users besides yourself or something like that. All right. Okay, I lied. Let me answer one more question. When copying test templates, is there an option to not include the DevSpec links? That is something we're working on right now. I do not believe it's in 5.2.1. I think it's in the very next release, though. They're giving you from DevSpec the option to include the links to the test cases or not. So feel free to follow up with me directly on that too, and I can confirm whether or not it made it into 5.2.1. I believe it's going to be in the next release, though. All right. Thanks so much for attending today. Thanks for all the questions. Once again, this will be up on our website in the next couple days. We covered a lot of material very quickly, so If you are new to DevTest and you want to learn more or have a chance to interact with me directly to learn about the features, that would be great. Feel free to reach out to your account manager or our sales number. If you're an existing customer and you would like some help configuring any of these features or understanding them, feel free to reach out to me also, and I'd be happy to help you out. All right, have a great day, and thanks again for attending.